Hello, and what is the single most important communication habit that you can implement immediately at work and at home that will help you to improve your communication outcomes? Stick with us to find out on today's Live at the Gym. So, what is the single most important communication habit that you can implement immediately at work and at home that will help you to improve your communication outcomes? Well, today we'll not only answer that question, but give you exercises you can do to build that muscle and start seeing results today. If I were to isolate the single most important habit to improve communication outcomes, it would be the level playing field. By creating a level playing field for every important conversation, you're putting intention and focus into action. When you start your conversations with explicit clarity, you dramatically improve the likelihood of achieving your intended outcomes. So, what is a level playing field? Well, it starts with the mental habit of defining three things: the purpose, the process, and the time frame for each important conversation. When you get clear on these three things before you begin your conversation, you get a lot better. When all parties involved in the conversation agree on these three things before the conversation begins, you get exponential improvement on your communication outcomes, your time management, and your accountability. So today we're going to focus on exercises that you can do to do that. And we've brought in one of our longtime members, John Anthony. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Hello.
Great to see you. John is a managing member of Fairway Independent Mortgage of Central PA. He oversees offices in Mechanicsburg and State College. Probably more importantly, I don't know if it's more importantly, but John is a civic and community-minded leader who's engaged in and with organizations working to help the community and the world be a better place. John, you've been such an active member in your community for so long. It's great to have you. Appreciate it. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I think the most important thing people need to know is that I'm your friend. No, Dale, you're right. I've been blessed to be in the Mechanicsburg community since I married my wife, who is literally lives across the street from the house, grew up in the house, across the street from the house we grew up in, or we live in. And my kids have grown up in the neighborhood, and I believe in leading by example. So the community-minded piece, trying to share with my children through example how to get involved, what to get involved with, how to be, everything is a lot easier to lift with many hands. And so happy to be part of that. And the chosen vocation of mortgage lending, that's another way of being able to give back, trying to help people with their personal finance in ways that will impact their lives forever. So makes me it makes me happy, right? And it's all about making ourselves happy, right? Find ways to make yourself happy. Well, giving back to the community, that makes me happy.
You selfishly keep contributing to your communities and all of the ones that you're involved in.
Amen.
Well, it is great to have you and to call your friend too, John. I appreciate you being here. Today, we want to focus on how to build out one of the most important pieces in your communication toolbox. And it's really how you begin a conversation. When we talk about that level playing field, it's how do you start the conversation to get it going in the right direction, make sure all parties on board are involved and engaged and get the most impact out of the time that you spend together. This is not a new tool to you. You've heard of it before. But what we want to do is help the audience to build it out a little bit by showing them how we'll build it and then how they can practice and make it a part of their daily routine so that they can get more out of every conversation that they really get themselves engaged in. A little bit more, I guess, chatter about this, John, to lay the groundwork. How many meetings have you been in your life where you just left, or conversations where you walked out and just went, what on earth was that about? What just happened?
More than I would like to count, for sure.
Yeah. And it happens, I think, to all of us frequently. And sometimes even when it's our own meeting, we walk out of it, our own conversation that we initiated.
That's a true story. So you set the stage for those meetings as best you can to try and make sure that the value is there and the time management, time is used effectively. There's lots of time for other things to happen, but so many times those other things happen through the course of the meeting, and it makes it maybe a little frustrating for others in the meeting. So it's good.
Yeah. Well, this habit is one that luckily each of us can do on our own, that we can build up this skill set to help us bring more to the table. And it makes us a more value-added member, whether it's our meeting or conversation that we called, or whether it's somebody else's. Getting clear on these 3 points really helps to bring focus. It's Stephen Covey's, begin with the end in mind, habit number 3, and making sure, no, that's habit number 2, proactive, begin with the end in mind, and then put first things first. But to make that a regular habit on a daily basis for your important conversations, we want to build that framework to do it. So John, I'm going to give you a little mental exercise to do while I set the stage. You've got some conversations coming up today, I assume, or to later in the week. I want you to think of one that you've got coming up that you'd be willing to share some framework around and build this level playing field with us. Okay. And I'm going to give a little bit of background on how we build this habit. So to start with, you build the mental habit. You make sure that when you're going into a conversation, you've got clear intention, that it's very specific, that you know what you want the outcome of the conversation to be. The outcome really is the purpose. Why are we talking? Very often that outcome falls into 4 categories: inspire, educate, entertain, or express. And when we say inspire, we want a call to action. We're going to inspire someone to do something. So is it a signed contract? Is it a decision to take a specific action, or to come up with 3 new marketing ideas? So we start with single phrases or words about the purpose of the conversation, asking ourselves, if the conversation goes perfect, what is that outcome? And then the second thing we do is, how long do we have for the conversation? How long should we have in a perfect world? Do we have 5 minutes? Do we have a half an hour? And is that an appropriate amount of time to spend on that outcome? And that really depends on the outcome that you've defined. And then finally, what's the best process to realize that outcome? The process is kind of a recipe or the meeting agenda. You can think of it that way. First, I do this, then you do this, or let's talk about this first and then this. And the other thing about process is putting in place, especially in today's day and age, some parameters. Is this a cell phone on conversation or a cell phone off conversation? Are we 100% engaged or 60% engaged? The real goal is to set that framework so that everybody's on the same page. That's why we call it the level playing field. So John, did you go through, you got something in mind?
I do.
Okay, so what we'll do to build the exercise is to start with just simple phrases. When we think about the purpose, what's your purpose for this conversation?
So this conversation is actually my initial conversation with a new employee that I'm onboarding in the next week.
Okay, so what are some outcomes? If the conversation goes perfectly, what are some outcomes?
So the idea of the purpose of the conversation is really to inspire the employee, to create an environment in their mind to recreate, because we've had lots of conversations up till this point, but to really set the stage through inspiration of what they're going to achieve in their role with our company. And then to kind of drill into that on the educate, how that's going to happen, right? Not as much the entertain. I'm not sure about the express, but the top 2 are really my primary purposes of the conversation. If I were going to walk through the next stage, I would say that I'm going to have this conversation in a 10 to 15 minute time frame.
Okay.
Except for if they have questions that need to be answered in that moment by me. If there are questions that need to be in the moment, but I can't answer them, or I feel like maybe somebody else should, we'll be documenting those questions so that we can resurface to them later. Okay. And then thirdly, I would say, when you're talking about, for me, process has to do with, I want to educate them on what it is I need them to know and do over the next short time frame. And then not only the what, but the how I need them to achieve that. So that's what I intend to get done in that 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay. Excellent overview. We got to educate on what their expectations are and how they get them done. Inspire them to stay motivated and be engaged with the organization. Yeah. And you don't, by the way, need to have all 4. Sometimes you don't want to have all 4. In most cases, you want to narrow it down and be really specific. And our time frame is 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how many questions they have.
That's right, because I feel like if we go on and on and on, that it dilutes the real purpose of what we're trying to do. So let's be concise. If they have questions, we'll decide whether or not those are to be answered at that moment or by other resources. So we can cover what we need to cover in 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, such a perfect example, right? You don't want to do too much, and we want to. The reason this tool works so well is because we want to compress our time frames and get the most out of every moment that we have with people to engage in them. It makes every conversation more powerful, and it gets so much from a time management standpoint as well.
Time management for me, but also for them, because it's imagine in this particular situation, their first day, they're being deluged with information. Yep. And so the time I'm going to share with them, I really want to be very focused on what I need for them to have from me in that moment.
Yeah. And such a great example too, because you're setting the stage for them that each conversation we have is an important one and we should be prepared and ready to take it forward.
And it will be time constrained as well, so that we can achieve the goals we need to achieve. If we go outside of that time frame for whatever reason, we're both going to agree that that was a needed thing to do.
Yep, exactly. So let's summarize. Here's how we've done the mental exercise. Remember, we're doing a 3-step process here. We do the mental exercise first. This, by the way, you can do if you're walking down the hall towards a meeting, you're going into that, go through that mental exercise of what I want the outcome to be. So for this one, we've done the mental exercise. Now let's turn it into short phrases of the purpose, process, and time frame. So not conversational yet, just really quick bullet points. What's the purpose? What's the process? And what's the time?
So short phrases, what's the purpose? The purpose is to create an excellent onboarding experience.
Awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
And to educate on next steps.
Perfect. That's simple, short, and sweet, right? And the time frame you said is about 10 to 15 minutes
10
at
to 15
most.
minutes, yep.
And the process?
The process is really walking the individual through what and then how, what needs to be done in what time frame, and then how to do that.
Yep. Perfect. And one more piece I would add to that is if you have questions, we'll address them either at the moment or there might be some we put off, right?
Yes.
Because we respect that time frame and we don't want to turn a 10-minute conversation into a 30-minute conversation where you're starting to go, okay, I've got another thing here.
We call that sometimes when we're doing training, we call that the parking lot, right? We're going to take that question, which is very important, but we're going to set it aside until a more appropriate time or to be answered by a better person to answer.
Yep. And it touches on one of the benefits of creating that level playing field, because now we know what we're here for and things that can and should be put on the parking lot into another important time frame to make sure we're addressing them as specific as possible.
I feel when you do this, when you do all of this, Dale, when you set up this process and you're showing them what you're doing, you're showing them a level of respect for who they are, regardless of whether they're a superior or an equal or even a subordinate. You're showing them the respect that you thought through this conversation in advance. You're trying to time constrain it and make sure that it's as relevant to them as it can be.
Yeah, 100%. It's about respecting both sides, your own time as much as theirs as well. And that's why it's one of my favorites, because you establish that level playing field of respect. Yes. So we've done the mental. Now we've turned it into a physical bullet pointed process. The next step in this is and one of the exercises you'll see on the playbook is to practice those bullet points at least 7, 8, 9 times before you're going into a meeting. This doesn't have to be a big exercise you do every day or take 45 minutes. It's just simple and succinct. I'm on my way to the meeting. Review your bullet points. What's my purpose? What's the time? What's the process?
Do you feel like it's okay to take notes in or on your phone, have notes in front of you so that you can remember your bullet points if you have too many to remember?
100%. And that depends. It depends a little bit on the nature of the meeting, right? If you're going to home to have a lovely dinner with your partner and you want to make sure that you express love to them, I might not pull up my phone and run through my bullet points. But if I've got an important meeting and I want to make sure that those things are there, it's effectively a meeting agenda. But when it becomes a mental habit, you can do it in short 2-minute conversations. You can do it in 15-minute conversations.
And we also find, I think, as we do this, that many conversations fall into the same category. So it becomes easier to remember in general what I'm trying to hit. The specifics may not be but the generalities of the purpose, for example, will flow better as you practice, right?
Yeah. Well, you've had maybe 1 or 2 initial mortgage meetings in your lifetime where you meet the client for the first time.
1 or 2.
1 or 2. And so the better you get at that, and you can cram a little bit more into it. I want to make sure you mention their experience coming on board. That's an outcome, right? The outcome is you want them to feel comfortable with the decision. You want them to feel knowledgeable when they come out. And those are important outcomes that you can add to the mix.
The CEO of my company talks quite a bit about everything that we do needs to be a 10, right?
Yeah.
So this onboarding experience, our entire goal is to make it a 10 for that new employee so that when they go home and talk to their spouse or their loved one or their significant other or their friends, they say, you know what, this was the best decision of my life to come on board with Fairway.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so now we've elevated you. We've had some good conversation. The final piece of the exercise, remember, we go through the mental habit, then we turn it into bullet points, and now we turn it into a statement or phrase that we want to be able to simplify, but should incorporate all those 3 things. So the conversational opener for that meeting, we'll put you on the spot and have you take a shot at it, John.
Wow. Okay.
Now, Me and the audience are going to be listening to hear those key bullet points that you identify.
Right. So I would start with something along the lines of, and I would stick my hand out, look them straight in the eye, of course, and say, welcome. Thanks for being here today. Super excited to have you coming on board. Our goal today is to spend about 10 to 15 minutes to talk through what we're going to get done over the next period of time. Let's call it a week. And we're going to revisit everything from a day-to-day basis. We're going to have another meeting like this a week from now. But during this 10 to 15 minutes, I want to talk about what we need to get done, what we want to get done, and how we're going to get it done. And I just want to tell you how excited we are to have you here at Fairway. Believe me when I say I believe this is the best place to work on earth in the mortgage industry. And I think we're going to be able to prove that out to you over a very short period of time. So very excited to have you on board. Looking forward to it. Do you have any questions right out of the gate that we can answer for you?
There you go. And like the pro that you are, you got to plug in for Fairway Mortgage in there too. Well done.
You asked the question.
Good job. So that's the stage. It doesn't mean that that's the first thing out of your mouth. You can have banter back and forth and nice chat. But when we're ready to knuckle down, when we're ready to get into the meat and potatoes and the main course meal of the conversation, we set that stage. And that's such an important piece because it creates a framing and we can all engage in that conversation. And sometimes you set that playing field out and the other person might have a different opinion of it. And they say, well, no, John, I don't have 10 minutes today, or I've got us scheduled for 45 minutes to go through all of my paperwork.
Yes.
It gives us a chance to clarify before we dive into that water, which helps, to your point, respect. That's about respecting both you and the other person.
So, and you're correct. I'm presuming that this was a preset meeting. I would ordinarily say with somebody who I don't have a preset meeting with, this is going to take about 10 to 15 minutes. Do you have that time available right now? Or do we need to go ahead and reschedule a time that's more appropriate and better for you? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you show people that respect, they tend to give it back to you.
Yeah. Well, and it oozes throughout the culture, right? If anybody has been to branches that John runs with Fairway Mortgage, you can feel that in the culture when you walk in the door. It's because you're a pro, my friend. So, well, John, I want to thank you. Let's do some wrap up comments here, and thank you for your participation today. Hopefully, it was helpful for our audience at home and for other people who will be watching down. Our goal is to inspire you to practice your communication skills that you can continually improve your quality of life. Be sure to grab the page from the TCG playbook that's going to give you everything you need to take this skill that we've talked about and implement it into the daily habits of your life. And also join us next week at 11:30 Eastern for another live communication workout. And we'll see you at the gym. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Dale.